Hey, my name is James Holt. I'm 32 years old, and I live in a second-floor apartment on Crestwood Lane in Delbrook, Ohio, a medium-sized town that has a university at one end and a river at the other, and not much in between except the kind of ordinary life that doesn't make it into any kind of story unless you pay close attention to it. I do piano tuning and maintenance. What that means, practically, is that I travel with a bag of tools and a tuning fork and a laptop. And I visit homes, churches, schools, and performance spaces. And I restore the instruments in them to the condition they were meant to be in. A piano is a precision instrument with roughly 10,000 moving parts. And it drifts out of alignment constantly with temperature changes, humidity, use, neglect. My job is to listen for where it's gone wrong and bring it back. Most of the people I do this for don't know the difference between a piano that is 3 cents sharp and one that is in tune. They know something feels off. They know it doesn't sound the way it should. I'm the person they call when they can't name the problem, but they can feel it. I started doing this 12 years ago when I was 20 as apprentice to an older tuner named Paul Garrett, who had been doing it for 40 years and who taught me that the real work was not in the mechanics. Anyone could learn the mechanics, but in the listening. He said the piano will tell you what it needs if you are quiet enough to hear it. He died 6 years ago and left me his client list and his best set of tools, which is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me professionally, and one of the kindest things anyone has ever done for me at all. I work alone. I drive a 10-year-old wagon with the back seat folded flat and a foam-lined case for the regulation kit in the trunk. I cover a range of about 60 miles. On a full day, I do 3 or 4 tunings. On a light day, I do 1 and spend the afternoon on a restoration project in my apartment. I keep an upright on permanent loan from an estate whose owner never claimed it, and I work on it the way some people do puzzles, a little at a time, no urgency. I eat dinner early. I read. I go to bed at a reasonable hour and get up the same way. I am not a man who talks about himself easily. I know that. When people ask what I do for work, I tell them and they say something like, "Oh, interesting," in a tone that means they are not sure what else to say. And then the conversation moves on. I don't mind this. The work is not about being talked about. It's about the piano sounding right in a room that was quiet before, and the way certain people close their eyes when it does. The apartment is small and has one window that faces the street and another that faces the building next door. I have lived there for 4 years. The things in it are mine. Books, the piano, a good lamp, a kitchen that works. There is no version of those rooms that was ever arranged for 2 people. And I have not thought much about this except at the odd moment, usually in winter, when the particular silence of a Sunday afternoon is impossible to mistake for anything other than what it is. It had been 3 years since anything that felt like closeness. Her name was Diane. We were together for 1 year, and she was kind, and we were wrong for each other in the specific way that 2 careful people can be. Neither of us said the hard things fast enough, and so they accumulated, and eventually there was more that was unsaid than said. And one October, she sat on my couch and said she thought she should go. And I agreed, which told both of us something. I still hear sometimes a particular chord voicing that reminds me of a song she used to play on her phone in the mornings. I don't avoid the chord. I just note it and move on. That September, I was 3 weeks into a new contract with Delbrook Community Music Academy, a nonprofit on the east side of town that offered lessons to children at low or no cost, funded by the university and a handful of local donors. They had 9 instruments in need of tuning and regulation, and the director, a woman named Sandra, had asked for a full assessment and maintenance schedule. I was working through them 2 or 3 at a time. It was methodical work, the kind I do well. And the academy was the kind of place I was glad existed, full of children who would not otherwise have access to an instrument, learning from teachers who were clearly there because they wanted to be. The grand piano in the main recital room was the one I had been saving. It was a 1961 Steinway Model B, which in its original condition would have been one of the finest instruments in a 60-mile radius. What it was in its current condition was a piano that had been through too many hands, too many moves, and too many years of inconsistent care. And it needed more than tuning. It needed a full regulation of the action, replacement of several damper felts, and a pitch raise before I could even begin the real work. I planned to spend 3 sessions on it. I had done the pitch raise the Tuesday before and was back on Thursday morning for the first real tuning session. Sandra had told me the room would be free until 11. I arrived at 8:30 with the case and sat up at the bench. I had been working for about 40 minutes, working slowly, listening carefully, the room quiet around me. When I heard the door, I turned. In the doorway stood a girl. She was about 7 or 8 years old, in a yellow jacket with a hood, a backpack over both shoulders, holding a white cane loosely in one hand, with the practiced ease of someone who has carried it long enough that it is part of how she moves through the world rather than a symbol of how she can't. Her eyes, when they moved toward the sound of the piano and my turning, were gray and very still, and aimed slightly above the level of my face. She stood in the doorway and said, "Are you fixing it?" "Tuning it," I said. "Same idea." What was wrong with it? It was out of pitch. Everything was pulled down from where it should be. "I'm bringing it back up." She considered this. What does that sound like? Before? I played a middle C the way the piano had sounded when I arrived Tuesday. I have pitch memory and can approximate, though I don't advertise this. It was flat, dull at the center, wrong in the way that wrong is hard to name but easy to feel. She wrinkled her nose. "Yes," I said. Then I played it correctly, the way it sounded now, and held the note while the room absorbed it. She was very still for a moment. "Better," she said. "Considerably." She took 2 steps into the room. Her cane moved in a short arc, confirming the space. "Can I listen?" I had a tuning in Glenfield at 11 and a regulation to finish here before that. The room was supposed to be free. I thought about Sandra and the schedule and the practical truth that a child in the room changes the acoustics slightly, and none of that took more than a second to weigh against the fact that she had identified the difference between a flat C and a correct one in one listen. "Sure," I said. "You'll have to be quiet. I'm listening to the piano." "I know how to be quiet," she said. She found the chair along the wall. The cane touched its leg. She tracked it with her hand. She sat down and set the backpack between her feet and folded her hands in her lap. She was quiet. I worked. I was aware of her in the way you are aware of a presence that is paying attention, not distracting, but there. She did not fidget. She did not ask more questions. When I played test passages to check intervals, she tilted her head at certain moments, and at others, she did not. I noticed which moments. After about 20 minutes, she said, "That's a fourth." I had just played a fourth interval in the mid-range of the treble. "That's right," I said. "My teacher showed me intervals. I can hear them." "How far are you?" "Fourths, fifths, and octaves. Thirds are harder." "Thirds are harder for everyone," I said. "The third is where the piano lies a little. It has to make everything else work." She thought about this. "It lies on purpose?" "It's called equal temperament. It's a compromise the whole system is built on. Every interval is slightly impure, so all of them can work together. That seems complicated. It is, I said. But the piano sounds right because of it, not in spite of it. She was quiet again. I kept working. Her name was Maisie. She told me that when I took a break at 9:30 and poured coffee from my thermos and offered her the bottle of water in my bag, which she accepted and opened herself with no difficulty. She was 7. She had been coming to the academy for piano lessons for 4 months. Her teacher was a woman named Carla. She liked the piano because she said this plainly, with the directness of a child who has not yet learned to qualify things. It's the only place where what I can do is exactly the same as what everyone else can do. I said, "You mean because you can hear everything they can hear?" "I can hear more," she said. I said, "That's probably true." She drank her water. "Do you like fixing pianos?" "Tuning them, yeah." "Why?" I thought about this. I said, "Because a piano that's out of tune is working too hard for a sound that's wrong. When you tune it, you can feel it relax. It stops fighting itself." She turned this over. How does a piano fight itself? The strings pull against each other. The frame holds them under tension. If the tension is wrong, everything is slightly at war with everything else. I paused. When it's right, all that tension becomes music instead of noise. She looked at me, at the space slightly above my face, with an expression that was neither a child's approval nor a child's boredom, but something more like recognition. My mom says that sometimes, about people. That they fight themselves. That when something is right, the fighting stops. I didn't know what to say to that, so I finished my coffee. At 10:15, I heard another sound in the doorway and looked up. She was in the doorway, this woman. And she had obviously come quietly on purpose because she did not want to interrupt. She was in work clothes, a nurse's set of scrubs in dark blue, a jacket held over one arm, her hair pulled back with the particular practicality of someone who needs it out of the way for most of the day. She was 34 or 35. Her eyes, when she found me and then Maisie and understood the arrangement of the room, were dark brown and moved through all of it quickly, the way eyes do when the person behind them is used to reading a situation fast. She looked at me with an expression that was not immediately readable, not hostile, but careful. The particular caution of a mother who has arrived to find her child with a stranger she doesn't know in a room she didn't expect her to be in. "Maisie," she said, "I told you to wait in the hall." Maisie turned toward the voice with no hesitation. "He's tuning the Steinway." I asked if I could listen. The woman looked at me. I said, "She came in about an hour and a half ago." I said she could stay. She held my gaze for a moment. I kept mine level. "I'm James Holt," I said. "I have the maintenance contract with the academy. Sandra can confirm." Something shifted very slightly in her posture. Not a full relaxing. She was not someone who relaxed fully in uncertain situations. I could see that. But a small recalibration. "I'm Nadia," she said. "Nadia Marsh." She looked at Maisie. "I'm sorry she interrupted your work." "She didn't," I said. She identified a perfect fourth at 9:15 without being told what I was playing. Nadia looked at her daughter. Something happened in her face that she didn't try to hide. A small, private flash of something that was not quite surprise because she had probably known this about her daughter for a long time, but was the kind of feeling you have when a stranger confirms it without being asked to. "She hears everything," Nadia said. Quietly. Not to me, exactly. "I know," I said. She looked at the room, at me, at the piano, at her daughter sitting with her hands in her lap, and the cane and the backpack. Then she said, "I'll wait in the hall until the lesson." I had 40 minutes left in the session. I looked at the bench. It was a wide bench, a proper piano bench, not a stool, the kind that has room for two. I was not sure what made me say it. I had been alone in rooms with pianos for 12 years, and I had not once wanted company while I worked. "You can wait in here," I said, "if you don't mind being quiet." She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, very carefully, very softly, "May I sit beside you?" I moved to the right half of the bench. She hung the jacket on the chair back and sat down. Not close, a careful, reasonable distance, appropriate to a stranger sharing a bench. She folded her hands in her lap the same way Maisie had folded hers. I noticed this and filed it away. I turned back to the keyboard and continued the tuning. The room had 3 people in it and was quiet in a different way than it had been before. Not less quiet. Just occupied by a different kind of silence. The kind that has people in it who are choosing to be still rather than empty. I played a sequence of tests across the upper treble. Maisie's head moved at the minor 7th. Nadia's, I noticed from the corner of my eye, did too. "You heard that," I said. She looked at me. "The 7th. You have relative pitch." "A little. I used to sing." I played the interval again, then resolved it upward. The room absorbed it. "That's better," she said. "Yes." We did not talk much. She asked one question about what the mutes were for, and I explained, and she nodded and asked nothing else. She watched my hands. I was aware of her watching and was not bothered by it. In the years I have spent in rooms with pianos, I have occasionally had someone sit nearby and watch. And usually it makes me self-conscious in the way that doing a thing well makes you self-conscious when someone is looking. With her, it did not. When I was done, I packed the tools back in sequence, the way Paul had taught me, each one in its place. Maisie said, "Will it sound like that tomorrow?" "Better tomorrow," I said. "It'll settle tonight. Come back Saturday." She said okay, with the tone of someone who intends to. At the door, Nadia said, "Thank you for letting her stay." I said, "She helped." Nadia looked at me. She asked too many questions. "Good ones," I said. Nadia looked at me for another moment. Maisie was already in the hallway, cane moving in its short arc, navigating toward the exit from a building she'd clearly navigated many times. Nadia's hand was on the doorframe. There was something she was deciding, I could see that. But I couldn't tell what it was. "Maisie has a lesson at 10 on Saturday," she said. "I usually bring her and wait. I'll be here from 8:30 to 11. She nodded. "Okay," she said. It landed the same way Maisie had said it, like a decision made. Saturday, I was deep in the action regulation when Nadia arrived with Maisie at 9:45. She walked Maisie to the lesson room. I could hear Carla's voice and then Maisie's from down the hall, and then she appeared in the doorway of the recital room. She had coffee from outside, 2 cups, and she held one out. "I didn't know how you took it," she said. "I got it black and brought the things." She had the little condiment packets from whatever shop it was, held in her fist along with the cup. I said black was fine. I took the coffee. She sat down on the piano bench without waiting to be invited, which told me the decision she'd been making in the doorway on Thursday had come out on one side. We talked while I worked. It went as it had before, in its way, her watching, asking practical questions, accepting the answers, and then occasionally saying something that I hadn't expected. She had been a nurse for 9 years. She worked pediatric recovery at Delbrook General, which meant she spent her days in rooms with children who were coming back from surgeries and procedures. And she had developed a precision about reading people in states of pain and fear and disorientation that I could hear in how she described things. She did not use emotional language very much. She described behavior. She described what hands and faces and breathing patterns told her. She told me about a 7-year-old she'd had in her ward that week who had cried for his father. And then his father had come, and the crying had stopped before the man had even reached the bed. Just the sound of his footsteps in the corridor was enough. She told me this without sentimentality. She told it as an observation. "That's your instrument?" I said. She looked at me. "Reading what a room tells you," I said. "What it needs. When something is off." She was quiet for a moment. I never thought of it that way. "Your daughter described it as hearing more. You do the same thing with everything that isn't sound." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't name exactly. Not surprise. More like the feeling of being seen in the way you don't know you wanted to be seen until someone does it. "Maisie says things I don't expect," she said. "I know." She told me about the fighting stopping. Nadia smiled. Not the polite version, the real one. Small and involuntary. She says that when I tell her that something's wrong before anything has happened yet, she says she doesn't understand how I know. A pause. I told her the same way she knows what note something is. You just do. "That's the right answer," I said. I'm not sure she believed me. She will eventually. She looked at the keyboard while I played a test sequence. After a moment, she said without looking at me, "Maisie's father left when she was 2. He didn't leave badly. He didn't do anything cruel or dramatic. The diagnosis came when she was 18 months. And by the time she was 2, he had made himself someone who wasn't there. Slowly, in the way some people do." She paused. "I'm not telling you that as anything. I'm saying it because I find myself telling you things. And I'd rather you understand what you're hearing." I stopped playing. I sat for a moment. "My previous relationship ended because I'm slow to say hard things," I said. She left, and I agreed she should. And then I spent a year understanding that agreeing had been the same as the problem. She turned to look at me. "I'm saying that because you said you'd rather I understand what I'm hearing," I said. She held my gaze. "Okay," she said. The Steinway was fully tuned by the end of that Saturday. I played through it once at the end, not a performance, just a check. Running from the bottom octave to the top. Listening for any place where something was still pulling against itself. There was none. The piano had settled overnight the way I'd told Maisie it would, and what was in the room now was the sound this instrument had been designed to make 40 years ago, restored to itself. Nadia was still on the bench. She said, "Play something." I said, "I'm a tuner. You've been playing for 3 hours. Test sequences. Play something that isn't a test," she said. I sat for a moment. I played a piece I had known since I was 16, a Schubert impromptu, the one in G-flat, which is not a piece you choose if you are trying to display skill, but which is the piece I have always gone back to when I want to hear if a piano is actually alive. It is built almost entirely out of movement and return. It goes away from its center and comes back. It goes away again. It comes back differently. I did not look at her while I played. I was listening to the piano. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You've played that before when you were sad." It was not a question. "How do you know?" I said. "You knew every note without looking at anything. You weren't finding it. You were remembering it." I said, "Yes." She said, "What was her name?" "Diane," I said. She nodded. She did not ask anything else about it. We sat on the bench in the quiet of the room. Down the hall, I could hear the end of Maisie's lesson. Carla's voice, and then a brief passage of notes. Broken, and then corrected, and then right. Nadia heard it too. Something shifted in her face at the sound of it. The look that was not quite surprise and not quite pride, but lived somewhere between them. "She's better than she was a month ago," Nadia said softly. "I know," I said. "I can hear it." She looked at me. "You've only been here twice." She heard a minor seventh on Thursday. That's not 4 months of lessons. That's years. Nadia was still for a moment. Then she looked at her hands. She had musician's hands, I noticed. Long fingers, clean clipped nails. The kind of hands that are used to fine work, though her instrument was people rather than strings. "I want to ask you something," she said. Not cautious now, just direct, the way she was when she was not deciding. "Okay. The coffee on Saturday is available most weeks, if that's useful information." I turned to look at her. She was looking at the keyboard. "That's useful," I said. She nodded. I packed the tools back in sequence. She walked to the lesson room to get Maisie, and I could hear them in the hallway. Maisie's voice describing something about the Steinway, how it sounded different now, better now. And Nadia saying yes, she could hear it too. Their voices getting closer and then past and toward the exit. And then Maisie's head appeared back around the doorframe. "Same time next week," she said to me. I said, "I'll be here." She said okay and disappeared. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday at the academy, I finished a regulation and was packing up in the main room when Sandra came in and stood in the doorway the way people stand when they have something to say that they have not been asked to say. Sandra was in her 60s and had been running the academy for 18 years. And she had the particular directness of a woman who has spent 2 decades fighting for funding on behalf of children who had no other advocates and had stopped wasting words in the process. She said, "The Steinway sounds like itself for the first time in about 12 years. I said, "It needed some time." Maisie Marsh played her first full scale on it yesterday, she said. She said it was easier than the upright in the lesson room because the keys were lighter. She paused. "You know she has almost perfect pitch." "I know." Sandra looked at me. Then she said, "Nadia Marsh is one of the best people I've encountered in the years I've been here." I say that as someone who doesn't say things just to fill up a room. I looked at her. She brings Maisie twice a week. She has been doing it for 4 months. She waits in the hall and reads, and never asks for anything, and never complains about the wait. Sandra paused. She has been doing everything alone for 5 years. I'm not sure she knows how to stop. I said, "She's learning." Sandra looked at me for a moment more, then said, "Good," and left. There was an afternoon in October, about 6 weeks into the Saturday mornings, when Nadia called me. Not about anything urgent. She said, "Maisie wants to know if the regulation kit has a name." I said it did not. She said, "She wants to name it." I said that was fine. There was a pause, and then Nadia said, "She's asleep." And I said, "Okay." And then we talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular. The hospital, a difficult week, a piece I had been restoring, something she had read. Her voice was different on the phone than it was at the piano bench. Less contained, easier. I noticed this and said nothing about it. When she said good night, I sat in my apartment for a while after and thought about what the difference was between a life that was in order and a life that had a reason for the order. And I found I could feel the line between those two things very clearly, the way I can feel the difference between a piano that is theoretically correct and one that is truly in tune. She called the following Tuesday. And the one after that. The man arrived on a Saturday in late October. I was in the recital room when I heard him at the front desk, a voice that carried without effort, the kind of voice that has learned to take up space. I heard his name, Marcus Sheen, and I heard him tell Sandra that he was a board member of the Fenwick Foundation and was conducting an informal review of Fenwick-funded programs. I did not know what the Fenwick Foundation was. Sandra did not raise her voice, but I knew from the evenness of it that she was not happy. I heard her say that she had not been informed of a review, and that she would need to verify his credentials, and that the children in lessons would not be available for informal conversations. And his voice went reasonable in the particular way that voices go reasonable when they have decided that the person they're speaking to does not understand what they're dealing with. I finished the notes I was taking and put the regulation kit away. In the hallway, Nadia was sitting in the chair she always took while Maisie was in the lesson room. She was watching the front desk conversation with her face very still, in the way it went still when she was reading a situation quickly. He noticed her at the same moment I stepped into the hall. What happened on his face was brief and would not have been visible from a distance. It was the expression of a man who sees something he expected to find somewhere else and is recalculating. He said her name, Nadia, with a familiarity that was its own kind of ownership. She said his name back without any inflection. He said something about a small world and asked what she was doing there, and she said her daughter took lessons here. And he looked at the closed lesson room door and said something about supporting young talent, and Sandra said, still evenly, that she would need him to wait up front. He looked at Nadia once more. "We should catch up," he said. The words were normal. The delivery was a reminder. After he went back toward the desk, Nadia turned to look out the window. I sat down in the chair beside her. Not the one across the hall, the one beside her. "He's on the foundation board," she said quietly. "He was the reason the contract for the Delbrook facility got restructured. He made things difficult for the nursing director for 2 months over a complaint that didn't have anything in it." She paused. "I filed the original report. He knew I filed it." "What's he doing here?" "Reminding me he's here," she said. I looked toward the front desk. Sandra had placed herself between Marcus Sheen and the hallway with the patient. Solid immovability of a woman who has been holding ground for 18 years and doesn't find it tiring. I said, "Sandra's not going to let him anywhere near the rooms." "I know." She was quiet. "It's not that." She turned to look at me, and her face was not afraid. I want to be precise about that. She was not afraid of him. She was tired in the way that people are tired, who have been careful for a long time because of one person and have not quite been able to stop being careful even after the situation changed. "He does this," she said. "He turns up. He doesn't do anything in particular. He just turns up." "Because he thinks it works," I said. She looked at me. "It only works," I said, "if you're still alone when he does it." She held my gaze. I stood up, which was not a dramatic thing. I simply stood up and walked down the hall to the front desk and stood beside Sandra. I said to Marcus Sheen, with the same flat tone I used to explain a repair to someone who has been given a higher estimate than they wanted, "Sandra's told you she needs to verify credentials. The rooms are occupied. If you have a legitimate review scheduled, she can set up a time." I paused. "If not, I can walk you out." He looked at me with the expression he had used on Sandra, reasonable, unbothered, slightly above the conversation. "I don't believe we've met." "James Holt," I said. "Maintenance contractor." He looked at me for another moment. Then he looked back toward the hallway where Nadia was. Then he looked at me again, and something in the calculation shifted. He said he would be in touch with the program director about a formal visit and left. Sandra waited until the door had fully closed and then said, "Thank you," in a tone that was entirely without drama and entirely sincere. When I came back to the hallway, Nadia was standing. She looked at me. I could not fully read her expression. It was the careful look, but with something else moving under it. "You didn't need to do that," she said. "I know. He won't do anything. He's just, I know," I said. "I didn't do it because I thought he would. I did it because you've been alone with it long enough." She was very still for a moment. The lesson room door opened and Maisie came out with Carla, describing something about a piece she was learning, the words rapid and specific. She found Nadia by her voice and took her hand. Then she turned her head toward me with the accuracy she always had. "James," she said. "Did you finish?" "Yes," I said. "Come listen." We went into the recital room, the three of us. I sat at the bench and played the full range once, the way I had played it for myself on the second Saturday, bottom to top, listening for what was right. The room absorbed it. Maisie stood very still with her head tilted at 3 or 4 places in the treble, and her face doing what it did when the sound was right. Nadia stood beside her with her hand on Maisie's shoulder and her eyes closed. The three of us in the room. The piano doing what it was built to do. That was the Saturday I understood what Paul Jarrett had meant when he said the piano tells you what it needs if you're quiet enough to hear it. I had thought he meant the instrument. I think now he meant something with a wider application. 8 months later, Maisie started intermediate lessons with a teacher at the university who works with gifted students. Because Carla, with characteristic plainness and without a trace of ego, told Nadia that Maisie had gone as far as she could take her and needed someone who could keep up. Carla said it the way she said everything, as a fact that served the student, not a reflection on anyone. Nadia cried for about 10 minutes in the car after that conversation, she told me later, and then drove to the university and enrolled Maisie in the program, and cried for 10 more minutes in the parking lot because she was happy and had forgotten how to do that, without it feeling like something was about to go wrong. The Steinway is in the best condition it's been in since the mid-'80s. I go back every 8 weeks. Sandra has started leaving a spare key for me, which she says is about convenience, and which I think is about trust. And I accept both meanings. On Sunday mornings now, when I am not on a call, Nadia comes over. She brings coffee, good coffee, from the place on the east side that she found in February, and has made a standing preference. Maisie sometimes comes and sometimes stays with her aunt, and the Sunday mornings, when it is just the two of us, are different from the ones when it is all three of us, and both are right in their own way. Nadia sits in the chair by the window with her feet pulled up and reads, and I work at the piano or read beside her, and the apartment is quiet in a way that is entirely unlike the quiet it used to have. Same silence, different weight. The weight of two people who have chosen to be in a room together on a Sunday morning because it is where they would rather be, which turns out to be a heavier thing than you would expect, and the most comfortable weight I have ever carried. There are pianos all across this county that need work I haven't gotten to yet. There is always another instrument pulling against itself, drifting from where it should be. I drive out to them with the tools in the back of the wagon, and I listen to what they need, and I bring them back. I have done this for 12 years. I will do it until I can't. What I understand now, that I did not understand before September morning, when a girl in a yellow jacket walked into a quiet room and sat down and listened, is that a man can spend his whole life knowing how to hear the thing that's wrong, and still not know how to hear the thing that's right when it walks through the door. You can tune a piano in a room for an hour and a half and only understand what it is you've been waiting for when a woman appears in a doorway and asks, in a voice just above a whisper, if she may come and sit beside you. The answer is yes. The answer has always been yes. You just have to be quiet enough to hear the question.